Hare Hare Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Ram Ram Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Jaya Kodani Jaya Maya Pochachi Jaya Kodani Jaya Maya Pochachi Jaya Shri Jyotsina Jaya Shri Jyotsina Jaya Giridhari Lal Jaya Giridhari Lal Jaya Nisingare Jaya Nisingare Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jayam Vishnupada Paramahams Viradikacharya Rashatara Shri Srimad Bhagavatam Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON Bhakti Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Sri Guru Parampara Ki Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Kodanatai Maipo Shashi Ki Jai Shri Tulsinath Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Girudai Lal Ki Jai Shri Nisringadev Bhagwan Ki Jai Srimati Vrinda Devi Ki Jai ISKCON Guru Vrinda Ki Jai Nityantra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the Lord Sri Sri Guru and Sri Guru and the Vishnu Reading from Prabhupada. He built a house in which the whole world can live. At the end of June, Swamiji returned to 26 2nd Avenue and to the hospital for checkup. The doctor was surprised at Swamiji's recovery and had no objection to his flying to San Francisco. So in search of sunny skies and eager to guide his followers in performing the first Rath Yatra, Swamiji had airline tickets booked for himself and Kirtanananda to San Francisco, New Jagannath Puri. The devotees greeted him with flowers and kirtan. It was different this time. He walked straight ahead with the aid of a cane. Jayananda was waiting with his station wagon to drive Swamiji to the private house they had rented north of the city at Stinson Beach. Have you been there, Prajunapu? Stinson Beach, no. But first, Swamiji said he wanted to visit the San Francisco Radha Krishna Temple. Jayananda drove to 518 Frederick Street. Swamiji got out of the car and entered the small storefront, which was filled with waiting devotees and guests. He bowed before the smiling Jagannath deities and without speaking a word, left the room, returned to the car and departed for Stinson Beach. The ride up through the seaside cliffs was so winding and climbing that Swamiji became nauseated, and even lying down in the back seat and having Jayananda drive slower didn't help much. Kirtanananda realized it would be too difficult for Swamiji to visit the San Francisco temple from Stinson Beach, but maybe that would be just as well. He could spend all of his time recuperating. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Perhaps there's some drone footage of Stinson Beach we can look at it on the windy road. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 5, chapter entitled Narada Muni Cursed by Prajapati Daksha. Which text? 30? 36. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Daksha Uvacha. Aho Asado Sadhunam. Aho Asado Sadhunam. Sadhu Lingena Nos Tvaya. Sadhu Lingena Nos Tvaya. Asadu Akari Arbakanam. Asadu Akari Arbakanam. Bhiksho Margo Pradarshito. Bhiksho Marga Pradarshito. Shri Daksha Uvacha. Aho Asadu Sadhunam. Sadhu Lingena Nastvaya. Asadvakarya Arbakanam. Bhiksho Marga Pradashitaho. Shri Daksha Uvacha. Aho Asado Sadhunam. Sadhu Lingena Nastvaya. Asadvakarya Arbakanam. Bhiksho Marga Pradashitaho. Vaishnavis. Shri Daksha Vacha. Prajapati Daksha said, O asado, O greatly dishonest non-devotee, sadhunam, of the society of devotees and great sages, sadhu lingena, wearing the dress of a saintly person, na, unto us, tvaya, by you, a sadhu, a dishonesty, akari, has been done, orbakanam, of poor boys who were very inexperienced, bhiksho marga, the path of a beggar or mendicant sannyasi, pradashitaha, shown. Prajapati Daksha said, Alas, Narada Muni, you wear the dress of a saintly person, but you are actually not a saint. Indeed, although I am now in Grihastha life, I am a saintly person. By showing my sons the path of renunciation, you have done me an abominable injustice. Please repeat. Prajapati Daksha said, Alas, Narada Muni, you wear the dress of a saintly person, but you are not actually a saint. Indeed, although I am now in Grihastha life, I am a saintly person. By showing my sons the path of renunciation, you have done me an abominable injustice. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Sanyasira alpa chidra sava loke gai. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya-lila 1251. In society, one will find many sannyasis, vanaprasthas, grihastas, and brahmacharis. But if all of them properly live in accordance with their duties, they are understood to be sadhus. Prajapati Daksha was certainly a sadhu because he had executed such great austerities that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, had appeared before him. Nevertheless, he had a fault-finding mentality. He improperly thought Narada Muni to be a sadhu or non-saintly because Narada had foiled his intentions. Desiring to train his sons to become grihastas fully equipped with knowledge, Daksha had sent them to execute austerities by Narayana Saras. Narada Muni, however, taking advantage of their highly elevated position in austerity, instructed them to become Vaishnavas in the renounced order. This is the duty of Narada Muni and his followers. They must show everyone the path of renouncing this material world and returning home back to Godhead. Prajapati Daksha, however, could not see the exaltedness of the duties Narada Muni performed in relation to his sons. Unable to appreciate Narada Muni's behavior, Daksha accused Narada of being a sadhu. The words Bhikshu Marga, the path of renounced order, are very significant in this regard. Sannyasi is called Tridanda Bhikshu because his duty is to beg alms from the homes of Grihastas and to give the Grihastas spiritual instructions. A sannyasi is allowed to beg from door to door, but a Grihasta cannot do so. Grihastas may earn their living according to the 4 divisions of spiritual life. The Brahmin Grihasta may earn his livelihood by becoming a learned scholar and teaching people in general how to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He may also assume the duty of worship himself. Therefore, it is said that only Brahmins may engage in deity worship, and they may accept as prasad whatever people offer the deity. Although a Brahmin may sometimes accept charity, it is not for his personal maintenance, but for the worship of the deity. Thus, a Brahmin does not stock anything for his future use. Similarly, Kshatriyas may collect taxes from the citizens, and they must also protect the citizens, enforce rules and regulations, and maintain law and order. Vaishyas should earn their livelihood through agriculture and cow protection, and Shudras should maintain their livelihood by serving the 3 higher classes. Unless one becomes a Brahmin, one cannot take sannyas. Sannyasis and brahmacharis may beg alms door to door, but a grihasta cannot. Prajapati Daksha condemned Narada Muni because Narada, a brahmachari who could beg from door to door, had made sannyasis of Daksha's sons who were being trained to be grihastas. Daksha was extremely angry at Narada because he thought that Narada had done him a great injustice. According to Daksha's opinion, Narada Muni had misled Daksha's inexperienced sons, asadvakaryavarkanam. And Daksha regarded his sons as innocent boys who had been misled when Narada showed them the renounced order of life. Because of all these considerations, Prajapati Daksha charged that Narada Muni was a sadhu and should not have adopted the dress of a sadhu. Sometimes a saintly person is misunderstood by grihastas, especially when he instructs their young sons to accept Krishna consciousness. Generally, a grihasta thinks that unless one enters grihasta life, he cannot properly enter the renounced order. If a young man immediately adopts the path of the renounced order in accordance with the instructions of Narada, or a member of his disciplic succession, his parents become very angry. This same phenomenon is occurring in our Krishna consciousness movement, because we are instructing all the young boys in the Western countries to follow the path of renunciation. We allow grihasta life, but a grihasta also follows the path of renunciation. Even a grihasta has to give up so many bad habits that his parents think his life has been practically destroyed. We allow no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, and no intoxication. And consequently, the parents wonder how, if there are so many no's, how can one's life be positive? In the Western countries especially, these four prohibited activities practically constitute the life and soul of the modern population. Therefore, parents sometimes dislike our movement, just as Prajapati Daksha disliked the activities of Narada and accused Narada of dishonesty. Nevertheless, although parents may be angry at us, we must perform our duty without hesitation because we are in the disciplic succession from Narada Muni. People addicted to householder life wonder how one can give up the enjoyment of grihasta life, which is a concession for sex enjoyment, simply to become a mendicant in Krishna consciousness. They do not know that the householder's concession for sex life cannot be regulated unless one accepts the life of a mendicant. The Vedic civilization therefore enjoins that at the end of one's 50th year, one must give up household life. This is compulsory. However, because modern civilization is misled, householders want to remain in family life until death, and therefore they are suffering. In such cases, the disciples of Narada Muni advise all the members of the younger generation to join the Krishna consciousness movement immediately. There is nothing wrong in this. Translation. Prajapati Daksha said, alas, Narada Muni, you wear the dress of a saintly person, but you are not actually a saint. Indeed, although I am now in grihasta life, I am a saintly person. By showing my sons the path of renunciation, you have done me an abominable injustice. Chakshuramilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragana Tanvitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakanvitamscha Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate, Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate, Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishavana Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Praye, Pranchakapatarubyascha Kripasindhavya Vicha, Parichanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's very interesting that I'm giving class on this verse. Some or other I remember giving class on this verse before, but perhaps it's not. Perhaps it's this part where it says, the Vedic civilization therefore enjoins that at the end of one's 50th year, one must give up householder life. So there must be another purport earlier in the Bhagavatam with that statement as well. Because just after I got married in 2009, I gave class on a verse where that was in the purport. And I was married when I was 50 years old. So about a week later, about 2 weeks after I got married, I had to give class on that verse that said that at the age of 50, I should give up married life. So anyway, so I'm still here, still in Grihastha. So anyway, this verse is like such a powerful verse actually, and this whole section, it really it's a very wonderful section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and like so it's I think the thing that's very important to understand is that first of all, to remember anyway, it's very important to remember that what does it say? Prajapati Daksha was certainly a sadhu. This is Srila Prabhupada speaking. Prajapati Daksha was certainly a sadhu, because he had executed such great austerities that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, appeared before him. And not only did Lord Vishnu appear before him, but actually Lord Vishnu said he was perfect. If I can find that, we've recited all of the prayers, your prayers. So after Prajapati Daksha had recited the Hansaguya prayers, then Lord Vishnu appeared to him, and it says, seeing that wonderful and effulgent form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prajapati Daksha was first somewhat afraid, but then he was very pleased to see the Lord, and he fell to the ground like a stick to offer his respects to the Lord. As rivers are filled by water flowing from a mountain, all of Daksha's senses were filled with pleasure. Because of his highly elevated happiness, Daksha could not say anything, but simply remained flat on the ground. Although Prajapati Daksha could not say anything, when the Lord, who knows everyone's heart, saw his devotee prostrate in that manner and desiring to increase the population, he addressed him as follows. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O most fortunate Prachetasa, because of your great faith in me, you have attained the supreme devotional ecstasy. Indeed, because of your austerities combined with exalted devotion, your life is now successful. You have achieved complete perfection. So it's like, that's like, that you can't argue with that Prajapati Daksha was a pure devotee. And that's in the opinion of Shukadeva Goswami, who's also like a highly elevated devotee. And Srila Prabhupada doesn't contradict that. He couldn't. We can't contradict that. And then in the next verse, Lord Vishnu says, Pritoham te prajanata yatte syo brahmanam tapaha mamaishakamo bhutanam yadbhuyasu vibhutaya. My dear Prajapati Daksha, you have performed extreme austerities for the welfare and growth of the world. My desire also is that everyone within this world be happy. I am therefore very pleased with you because you are endeavoring to fulfill my desire for the welfare of the entire world. So Prajapati Daksha wasn't just any old sadhu. He was like amongst the Prajapatis, it seems that he was the example of a pure devotee amongst the Prajapatis. And and therefore, even though he may be portrayed as being very proud, but he had a reason to be proud, and he was being authorized and empowered, and he had the Lord's blessings to be that person who populated the entire universe for the sake of giving the living entities an opportunity to practice gradually different aspects of the Vedic plan to gradually bring people back to the platform of being able to accept pure devotional service. So it's just like, and like it's interesting how Srila Prabhupada, compares this to ISKCON, that, the parents complain that, very pious, especially you can imagine very pious Indian parents, who've brought their children up, they've given their children all the sanskaras, even Garbhadan sanskara. There are still families in South India, in the big like Vaishnav Sampradayas who do still practice Garbhadan sanskara, and all of the other sanskaras, and like the children like very special children, and they've invested so much, they've undergone so much time and austerity to bring their children up in that way. And so Srila Prabhupada's saying this, he's saying that yes, sometimes a saintly person is misunderstood by our grihastas, especially when he instructs their young sons to accept Krishna consciousness. So you might ask, well, why do they need anything more? Why would Srila Prabhupada preach to like very like pious Indian parents who are total vegetarians, who I've stayed in these houses of these people with that kind of mentality, that even though they have to go to work every day to the office, and like they might have to leave home at like 6 o'clock in the morning to get through traffic to go to work, but they'll get up at 4 o'clock, and do their prayers for an hour every morning before they, they take a bath, do their prayers, and then they won't eat anything. And then they'll like make sure their children are up and take them to school, take their wife to work, and then they come back in the evening and they'll take another bath and do their puja again. And it's not necessarily, and they're not demigod worshippers. Many those in the Sri Sampradaya and the Madhva Sampradaya, they're like very strict and devoted worships of Lord Vishnu and Lord Narayan. So why would Srila Prabhupada want to tell them to why would Srila Prabhupada want to take their sons and get their sons to join ISKCON? Why would he do that? Especially when the ISKCON devotees are not following anywhere near that standard of like cleanliness and self-sacrifice, nowhere near it, nowhere near. And I once remember I was in Aberdeen with Sharanga. We went up there for 2 weeks to advertise a program, and like one of our friends, she let us stay in their flat, and there was like 5 students staying in one flat. And like every single one of them got up early and did their puja for an hour before they went to university. And they were like just really nice like that. So why would Srila Prabhupada take someone out of that environment and like put them in the association of like us lots, Why would he do that? Well, he does it because because what had happened, that even though they were following so strictly the Vaishnav Dharma, like all of the rules and regulations in the Hari Bhakti Vilas or in their own Sampradaya, the Ramanuja Sampradaya, the Madhva Sampradaya, even though they were following all of that, they were becoming Mayavadis. Yeah, they were becoming Mayavadis because they didn't, when they got older and went to university and mixed with like Westerners, then they became attracted to the philosophy of the Mayavadis, because it was more interesting and it was more ecumenical, it was more all-inclusive, it was like more exciting in one sense. And they would, and especially because they would see that the different very strict practices of the Hindus and the Sikhs and the Muslims, that it was causing immense amount of conflict in India, and people were like slaughtering each other just because they were so strongly attached to their own communities. So this also happened in Srila Prabhupada's life. When Srila Prabhupada was at the Scottish Churches College, like between, I think it was like 1906 to 1918 or something like that, in like secondary school. And then actually it's interesting that the head teacher, Dr. Dr. William Spence Urquhart, who was from a tradition of Scottish Presbyterian ministers. And so he invited into this. He was the head teacher, and he invited into the school He invited a Mayavadi into the school to give a lecture, and that Mayavadi had been traveling all over India, basically teaching the children that now is the time to give up your sectarian ways and embrace the universal humanitarian faith. Now is the time to embrace all of your Muslim and your Christian brothers and sisters, and give up all of this kind of mythological nonsense, and just surrender to the Advaita Brahman. So that was what he was teaching, and that was very much promulgated by the Ramakrishna Mission in Bengal, by Swami Vivekananda. So it had become very fashionable, and it was also very fashionable amongst the intellectual English society as well. And that was the kind of atmosphere that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was preaching in, and he saw that the English intellectuals and the Indian intellectuals were trying to bring the world's religions together and eliminate God for the sake of peaceful coexistence. And that was also what was happening in San Francisco in the 60s as well. No one was joining the Salvation Army and Haight-Ashbury. No one was joining the Hasidic Jews, and no one was joining the really sort of very strict Vaishnav sampradayas, because they saw that as anachronistic. They saw that as part of they saw that as the root cause of all of the sectarian violence that had gone on in the world for the previous 500 years. So Srila Prabhupada knew that even those children who were living in the families of extremely pious and austere Indian parents, even those children would be corrupted by this Mayavadi. So that's why Srila Prabhupada wrote his own pranams. So when the devotees were first, in 1966, 67, everyone just called Prabhupada Swamiji. But then he understood that it was kind of lots of other gurus were also called Swamiji as well, like Ram Das and Darfree John and Meher Baba and all of the other gurus who were around at that time. They were also, their disciples called them Swamiji as well. So Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to respect him not just as Swamiji, but as the representative of the parampara going back, thousands of years. So he gave the devotees the first part of his pranams, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane. I offer my respectful obeisances into his divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, who is very dear to Krishna because he has taken shelter at his lotus feet. So this is very important, that Srila Prabhupada is very dear to Krishna because he's taken shelter at Krishna's lotus feet. He's Krishna Preshtaya. He's Vishnu Padaya. So he's taken shelter at the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. So in that sense, he's teaching the same strictness and the same adherence to the different sampradayas that those pious Hindus are teaching their children. So in that sense, he's Vishnu Padaya. And Srila Prabhupada always displayed that whenever he went to any of the temples. And just as Lord Chaitanya did when Lord Chaitanya was on his tour of South India, whether he was visiting a Vishnu temple, a Shiva temple, a Ganesh temple, or a Durga temple, he would always bow down to the deity with equal respect. And on one particular, when he was just arriving in Jagannath Puri with Gadadhar Pandit and Mukunda and Damodar, then he purposely left Jagannath Puri to go to Bhubaneswara to pay his respects to Lord Shiva in Bhubaneswara. That's like the name for Lord Shiva is Bhubaneswar, and there's like 2 or 3 very big Shiva temples there. So in this sense, Srila Prabhupada is Vishnu Padaya. He's like, he offers all respects to Lord Vishnu in all of the different forms and to the demigods as well. Actually, this when every morning we say that, and the second offense against the holy name is to, or is it the third offense? No, the second offense. What's the second offense? Yeah, that's right. So it's an offense to consider the names of the demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of Lord Vishnu. So that means they're not equal. It's an offense to consider the demigods to be equal to Lord Vishnu, but it's also an offense to consider Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be independent of Lord Vishnu, because they're both his like very dear devotees. So if we're coming to a place where there's like, so they're equal to Srila Prabhupada, they're on an equal level as Srila Prabhupada. They're Krishna Prasthaya also. So therefore it's an offense to neglect them and to disrespect them. And it's an offense to neglect and disrespect their genuine devotees. So Srila Prabhupada, in that first verse of his pranams, he was really establishing that he wasn't just Swamiji, that he is Vishnu Padaya. He's constantly at the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu in whatever form Lord Vishnu appears. And actually, if you read the Vishnu Sahasranam, the 1,000 names of Lord Vishnu, and then one of Lord Vishnu's names is Shiva, like that. And so it's like there's no difference between, in one sense, it's the Chincha Beda Beda Tattva. Lord Shiva is also the Kala Shakti of Kalismin, a time I am. That is Lord Shiva, the destroyer. So that is also Krishna in the form of Lord Shiva. But then in the second, that was in 1967 or 66, and then the second part of Prabhupada's pranams he didn't add it until a year later. So for a whole year, the devotees were just chanting that first part, and then the next year, then because he saw there were so many Mayavadis in New York and in San Francisco and all over the world, not Mayavadis in this, they didn't know they were Mayavadis, they didn't know what a Mayavadi was. But what they were preaching and what they were promoting, was that, that we should all be peaceful together. We shouldn't argue with each other. We should respect everybody, and just let everybody believe what they want to believe. And what's that? Yata Pata. What is it, Ashish? Yata Pata. What is it? What is it? Yata Mata, Yata Pata. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. However many opinions there are in the world, then there are that many bona fide paths to God. So that was the actual mentality of the whole hippie movement. As long as you're like, the only thing that was required of the hippie movement is that people were kind of non-violent in one sense. That was the only religious principle, that you don't be really nasty to other people. That was the religion of the hippies, basically. And so then Srila Prabhupada really saw the insidious nature of the Mayavadi influence. And who knows, we don't know whether there was, perhaps there may even have been some Mayavadi guru who manufactured the whole hippie movement just for that sake. Okay, so I'll just stop there. So the reason I'm mentioning this is because Srila Prabhupada recognized that this was the real danger, and this was the real threat to human society. It was a bigger threat than starvation, a bigger threat than nuclear war, a bigger threat than climate change. The threat of Mayavadi philosophy was the greatest threat. Therefore, when Srila Prabhupada wrote these pranams, he says, Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pracharne, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne. Obeisances unto him, servant of Saraswati Devi, means like coming in the line of coming in the line of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he's boldly preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya. And in that way, he's delivering the Western world, which has become submerged in impersonalism and voidism. So similarly, Narada Muni, and we can only assume that this is Srila Prabhupada's understanding. This is Srila Prabhupada's understanding of this pastime, that he could perceive that although Daksha was actually a pure devotee, but that he'd become a little bit intoxicated by his power and having so many children, and therefore he was becoming infected by Mayavadi, and that gradually that he would have become degraded. So therefore Krishna was saving his sons by taking them out of that situation. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions or comments?
So we see that as we go further into this pastime, that Prajapati Daksha will be cursing Narada Muni, but that's not the first time that he's cursed a great personality, because previously he had cursed Lord Shiva. Because out of pride, he felt that Lord Shiva had disrespected him in the assembly, and so he had to suffer a reaction for that. And in the chapter summary of this chapter, Srila Prabhupada says that Daksha means expert in sex life. So how do we reconcile that in our minds, that he's a pure devotee, but he's going through all of this stuff?
Well, you may not be able to recognize, you may not be able to reconcile it in the way that you want to reconcile it. It's like reconciliation it's a process, just like there are people called arbitrators between trade unions and big companies, and they bring the trade union together with the big company, and they go through a process of reconciliation. It may take like 10 or 20 years. So if you want to reconcile it in like a couple of days, you're going to be really frustrated. Sorry?
I didn't mean reconcile it in a way to settle it, but the way to understand it in our minds.
No, that's what I'm saying. That we won't be able to understand it. It's taken me, I would say it's taken me like 10 years to reconcile this verse, to reconcile this pastime. And that's...
Reconciled it.
Sorry?
You've reconciled it. It's taken you 10 years, so I'm asking you, how did you reconcile? How can you give us advice on how we can reconcile it? Because...
So what did you say, Takship?
Severe austerities.
Well, it's the nature of the material world. I mean, look at the pastime of when, after Ashvatthama had killed the sons of Draupadi. Look at that pastime. It's like, so what was it? So, I remember the pastime, the whole pastime now. Anyway, it was Ashvatthama who tried to kill Parikshit, wasn't it? So, was that after he killed the sons of Draupadi or before? It was after, wasn't it? Yeah? So, so Ashvatthama thought he was a Brahmin. There's no account in right up to that point when Ashvatthama killed the 5 sons of Draupadi. He's not a villain in the Mahabharata. He's just like one of the Kshatriyas, one of the great Maharatis, one of the great protectors of Dharma. But he Duryodhana also is like a protector of Dharma. He's like the people love him. He's like Daksha, Duryodhana looks after the citizens, and that's why Yudhishthira was thinking, I've killed Duryodhana and all, but actually they were really good administrators. The only thing that was wrong with him is that he was envious of Krishna. That was the only thing, yeah. I mean, sorry? Yeah, no, the rest, but the thing is that 99% of the population don't know who Krishna is. And they won't know, because it's described that only about 200 people knew who Krishna was. So when Shishupal is laying into it's not that everybody was thinking, oh, Shishapal, what a nasty person insulting Krishna. A lot of other people would have had a similar opinion of Krishna as well, or maybe not quite as extreme. But then, like in the moment, so Ashvatthama thought he was just doing a favor to Duryodhana, like he felt that Karna had been killed unfairly, and that like Krishna had used devious means to win the battle. And so Ashvatthama was feeling sorry for Duryodhana, and he honestly thought that Duryodhana was a good guy, looking after the population. He was a good king, and so he just thought he was doing him a favor by killing the sons of Draupadi, who were like going to be the next generation. He thought he was doing him a favor. But then, as we know, then Duryodhana was disgusted that he'd done that, even though it was doing him a favor. He was doing him a favor. Okay, but I'm
doing it in the wrong way. Just as Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, that
okay, but then
you think you're acting on religious principles, but actually you're doing it in a wrong way. You're not surrendering.
Yeah, but you won't understand that unless you become a pure devotee. So that's the thing. We can perhaps understand. We just accept the truth. We accept that Srila Prabhupada is the greatest devotee who's appeared on this planet. Probably since Narada Muni. So therefore we don't criticize him, because we've got complete faith that Srila Prabhupada knows who Krishna is and knows that Krishna is in the heart of all living entities. And therefore, even if Srila Prabhupada does something which really disturbs very pious people a lot, then we just think, well, it's for the benefit of that person ultimately, But now we can't. Now the ISKCON leadership doesn't have that degree of faith in themselves, because out of humility, they're not thinking that we are as elevated as Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, they tread her more lightly, and therefore we're actually discouraged from like telling children to leave university and join the ashram. In fact, there was actually a devotee at the Manchester temple called Romans, not the same Romans that's in Wales, a Lithuanian devotee who was like really fired up, and he was coming to the temple in Manchester, and I was telling him, give up university, just join the temple, give it up. But then the temple president came over and he gave me a really hard time for saying that, He said, no, we don't do that anymore. We just encourage people to finish their degrees and get a job, get it. No, I mean, I'm not criticizing it. I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't understand that at that time. I was thinking, this is crazy. I was thinking it's not surprising that there aren't any brahmacharis in this temple, But now I understand that it's a whole strategy, and it's the strategy that Radhanath Maharaj follows in Mumbai. That there's like a waiting list of about 1,000. If you want to become a brahmachari in Chowpatty, there's a waiting list of about 1,000 people ahead of you. You have to have a PhD and have to have worked in business for 2 years before you can become a brahmachari. And I think it's a really good thing. I think it's a really good thing, because children are not brought up in an austere environment. Children are not brought up to bow down to their parents every morning. They're not brought up to realize that they're going to have to stand on their own 2 feet and really work hard to support their families. So and therefore I can understand that even if somebody is really, really enthusiastic to join the ashram, it's a very, very big risk to tell that person to give up their degree and give up their career and just come and join the ashram. You have to ask yourself, am I sufficiently pure to be able to look after that devotee for his entire life? Am I qualified to be that person's guru? Because that's what you're doing when you're telling someone to join the ashram. You're basically saying, I'm like an elevated devotee, and I'll look after you for the rest of your life, and like I'll protect you, and I'll help you when perhaps later in your life you regret doing that. So it's but how do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile it like that? That in some temples in ISKCON, they'll be saying, give up your career, just become a brahmachari. And then they'll be getting this section of Bhagavatam out and then saying, look, that's what Srila Prabhupada says. Narada Muni's right. Srila Prabhupada says we are on the side of. Srila Prabhupada said it. He said we are like that is what we are. We are like Narada Muni's. It doesn't matter what people say to us. It doesn't matter if it's politically incorrect or whatever it is. We are representatives of Narada Muni. That's what Srila Prabhupada says. Because we're not pure devotees. That's why. Yeah, but we're not following what the pure devotee is wanting us to do. We're not that austere. If you read Mother Jamuna's biography, like of when she was in India in like 1971, the first time Prabhupada took all of his disciples to India, like Brahmananda, Vishaka, Shama Sundra, Kirtananda, Mother Mandakini, Mother Jamuna, Mother Kaushalya, Mother Malati. There was about 30 of them in Vrindavan. So there was nowhere to sleep. Like there was just, they were just sharing their like little huts with rats and snakes, and they had no showers. Mother Jamuna was taking shower. She was bathing in a pool of water that a rabid dog was also bathing in. And like some of the women got like severe skin diseases because of that. And then when they went to Mayapur, and they were like, when they were first year when they started building Mayapur, it was just like they were living in like 2 foot of mud. I mean, like when you come into Mayapur in the main entrance, if you just turn left and go right round the inside of the walls in Mayapur, then they've got these little shacks, like where now the people who live there now are like the rickshaw wallahs or like the bungis or somebody, but that's where the devotees lived, and it was just like they were just living in mud, So, well, it does take that. Yeah, it takes what it takes to become a pure devotee is that you feel like privileged, even when you're in that kind of situation and that sort of austerity, because you see that your spiritual master is also living in the same situation. You see that he's also willing to accept that austerity as well. So if we actually are honestly, we have to put ourselves to the test. We may be able to imagine that if Srila Prabhupada was here, I would be able to accept that austerity. But we have to put ourselves to the test, because only then can we really say to somebody, give up your career, give up your education, just come and join the temple. Only then can we say that. We can't say it otherwise. You might say, well, it's not. You might say, well, we're not asking people to come and accept that level of austerity, that things are not so austere as they are now. But look at Ukraine. This could become Ukraine tomorrow. So, like, if we knew that this was going to be Ukraine tomorrow, like, would you say to somebody, give all of your money to ISKCON, like, leave your career, just come and join the brahmachari ashram, we'll look after you? Would you be able to say that to somebody? Great. Well, I'm very pleased you're here, Prabhu. Thank you very much. No, I'm really pleased. Thank you very much. I mean, great. That's fantastic. Sorry? I don't know. Well, but the thing is, what I'm saying is, would we, do we know ourselves well enough that we could honestly say, I'll look after you in any situation, however austere it gets, whether, you know, I'll look after you even if like we're completely off grid, we've got no electricity, we're like have to live in sub-zero temperatures for 6 months of the year. I'll look after you even then. Yeah. Yeah, I know they are. I know that, and you know that. But unless we've really, how do we know that? Unless we've lived through it, how do we actually know that we would be able to surrender? Yeah, well, that's great. Well, thank you. I'm really pleased, Prabhu, that you're here. I'm really pleased that you've got that faith. The thing is, we've got the opportunity to try to practice it. And Srila Prabhupada wanted us to live very simply and to become resilient. That's like the greatest, all of the great brains in like the think tanks in the world at the moment have come to the understanding that the most important asset that a community can have is resilience. And Mahatma Prabhu has been giving some amazing workshops on community resilience. The first part of community resilience is to be completely honest with all the members of the community, so that you're never going to. So that if like the shit hits the fan, you're not going to be with a group of people who don't really trust each other. So it has to be like total trust, like, between the members, and for you to be able to attain that level of trust, you have to have like, there's going to be a lot of friction in the beginning. You know, if you've ever been to any of Mahatma's workshops on forgiveness, you know, it's like you have to be able to become so close to people that you can forgive them you can forgive them anything, actually. Just like Krishna forgave Ashwatthama because Kripi didn't want Ashwatthama's mother to suffer in the way that she'd suffered. And I've got a meeting with Bharani, so thanks so much. Yeah, okay, thanks so much. Yeah. Can someone do me a favor and just call Bharani now, then, to let him know? Okay, thank you. Okay. Anyway, it's very nice. If I'd been asked to give class on this verse about 6 months ago, I would have been terrified, because I would have think, I'm just going to misrepresent Srila Prabhupada. But I would say that it's inconceivably one and different. The Daksha and Narada Muni are both highly elevated pure devotees, and they actually are. And Krishna, because they are pure devotees, Krishna uses them to like teach us something. Okay, Grand Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Sai Gaura Premanandi, Harimo. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai.